exchange amongst Indigenous peoples. The SSMU recognizes and respects these nations as the traditional custodians of the land and water in which it is located. Moving on to attendance. Just explanatory note for proxies. If you're here as a proxy, when I reach the person that you're here as a proxy for, please say present, and then I'll ask you to spell your first and last name and to state your personal pronouns if you would like to do so. Additionally, for those of you, if this is your first time at SSMU Legislative Council, just a few notes. We do take a 10-minute break every 2 hours to comply with Quebec labor laws. Additionally, if you need to excuse yourself from the room before we reach 2-hour increments for our breaks, just raise your placard on a point of personal privilege and request permission to leave. And with that, we'll move on to attendance. Councillor Chan, Arts. Here. Proxy, so if you can just wait for a microphone to reach you. And present, could you spell your first and last name? Oh, turn it on.
Sorry, I'm a novice. S-T-E-F-A-N, last name S-U-V-A-J-A-C, pronouns he, him.
Great, thank you. Councillor Chase, Arts. Councillor Dandamudi, Arts. Councillor Daryani, Arts. Proxy.
Name, J as in Jaguar, A, M as in mall, A, L. Last name, T, A, R, R, A, B, A, I, N. Lauren, as your floor fellow, you should know how to spell that.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pronouns, if you'd like to state them.
He, him.
Thank you. Councillor Franceschini, Arts and Science. Councillor Kirsch, Athletics. Councillor Kay, Clubs. Councillor Flaherty, Clubs. Councillor Sabeti, Dentistry. Dentistry representative. Councillor Bullhose, Education. Yes. Councillor Faki, Engineering. Councillor Marcoux, Engineering. Councillor Ramey, Environment. Councillor Das, FYC. Councillor Mackey, Law. Councillor Eisner, Management. Councillor Gervey, Management. Councillor Dixon, Medicine. Councillor Platt, Music. Microphone. Please spell your first and last name and your pronouns if you'd like to do so.
Do I have to spell them? I think they're on record by now. S-E-B-A-S-T-I-E-N. D-U-C-K-E-T-T.
Okay.
He, him.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Patzer, Nursing. Are you okay, VP Internal? Councillor Morgan, PTOT. Councillor Freed, IRC, Residences. Councillor Wu, Science. Councillor Butcar, Science. Councillor Wright, Science. Councillor Lametti, Senate Caucus.
Proxy is Senator Adrienne Tessier, A-D-R-I-E-N-N-E, Tessier, T-E-S-S-I-E-R, she, her.
And we'll just note as well, you are employed in a casual position with the SSMU. Yes. So there's no business on the agenda this evening concerning your position, so you're entitled full rights to vote. Councillor Garneau, Senate Caucus. Councillor Morali, Services. The social work seat is still vacant, I believe. SSMU President. VP University Affairs. VP Student Life. VP Internal. VP External. VP Finance. Wonderful. Moving on to approval of minutes. The minutes were distributed. Are there any changes or corrections to the public minutes for November 28th? I see no changes or corrections, and so the minutes will stand approved as distributed. The minutes for January 16th, 2020 were distributed. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? I see no changes or corrections. Those minutes will stand approved. Item 4C, Legislative Council confidential minutes for the 16th of January 2020. Are there any changes or corrections to the confidential minutes? Seeing none, those minutes will also stand approved. Moving on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda at this time? Seeing no changes or additions, could I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councillor Freed, thank you. Second, Councillor Patzer. All those in favor? Opposed? And the agenda is adopted. Moving on to report of the steering committee. The steering committee for this evening's meeting convened on January 24th, 2020 for an electronic session. There were no guest speakers. All motions on the agenda this evening were reviewed. There was a motion submitted, the motion amending the policy on McGill fees until fossil fuel divestment. There were significant changes flagged by the steering committee which were communicated to the movers. Prior to the finalization of the agenda deadline, the motion was withdrawn, and so it is not on the agenda this evening. All motions from business arising remain on the agenda. Those with comments, questions, and suggestions on steering committee or legislative council are welcome to send them to the speaker by email. There will not be a confidential session this evening. Are there any questions on the report of the steering committee? Seeing no questions on the report of the steering committee, we'll move forward to report of the board of directors. Item 7 in your folder. I don't see the president, VP Finance, perhaps, to read the report of the board, or another officer. Vice President Finance.
Okay, so you have to excuse me. This was just read it in advance, correct? Okay, so this is explaining the reasoning behind the Board of Directors not to suspend the Vice President University Affairs based on the Accountability Committee report issued and that was also published in the McGill Daily. If you have any questions regarding it, I would recommend waiting until the SSMU president returns, but I'll do my best, and the other execs that were there as well will do the best to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the board of directors? I see no questions. Oh, proxy for Senator Lametti.
Especially given the number of proxies attending today, is there any way for us to be given access to that material?
Which material?
Like the letter? How can we access the letter here?
So for proxies, if you have an @smu.ca account, you can access the Legislative Council folder. If you can't, let me know. I'll share it with you with your senator email. If you're not, if you don't have an @ssmu.ca email, unfortunately that projector is broken, so you can look on the screen of somebody beside you. We don't have permission to share the documents outside of anyone with an SSMU email, though. Okay, so I see no further questions. And so with that, we'll move onwards on the agenda to the Accountability Survey Administration. So, counselors, this is an annual mandate issued to the Accountability Committee through the internal regulations of committee terms of reference. On an annualized basis, you as counselors are entitled to conduct a evaluation of the officers as well as your fellow counselors should you wish to do so. For those of you who have been to Legislative Council before, this year, there's a link to an electronic copy in your voting documents list, which I'll open for you briefly once I go through the instructions. But just for the time being, let me briefly explain that the accountability survey, all results are completely confidential. Nobody will see your individual responses, and then they'll simply be taken in aggregate and then reported back to the Legislative Council in public session. Let me just also make clear that you have the right to decline to complete it should you wish to do so. And if you do not feel like you have enough information or knowledge to comment on a specific officer or member of Legislative Council, you are encouraged to simply leave that row blank. You're not under any obligation to complete the entirety of the form. So with that, I'm also going to have the parliamentarian just project the instructions. Okay, so briefly for counselors, there are several questions on the accountability survey. The instructions are projected for you. So we'd ask you to please evaluate each executive and counselor on a scale from 0 to 10 on each of the dimensions presented. And we ask you to also not evaluate yourself. As I mentioned, if you don't have enough information or do not know how to evaluate an executive or counselor on a given dimension on the survey, simply leave that row blank. And if you cannot comment at all, then simply don't and just leave the row blank. So with that, I'll just briefly ask first, are there any counselors that require a paper copy? Because either they don't have access or they just would prefer to fill it out on paper. So just one? Okay. For everybody else, what we're going to do, we're going to take a brief 15 minute recess. Yes, of course. A 15-minute recess. Followed by the recess, we're going to return to the regular schedule of business. And so with that, Vice President External.
I was just wondering, is there a reason why we're doing this during council and why this can't be done in our spare time?
It's done during council specifically to ensure that it is completed. Again, you had the right to decline not to do it, but the steering committee decided to allocate time to it, so there's time allocated to it. And so with that, we'll take a 15-minute recess, apologies, and I'll open the form. Councillors, you can find it through your voting directions document. For those of you requesting a paper copy, I'll come around and circulate one to you. 15-minute recess. accountability survey open for the next 48 hours. If you have not had a chance to complete it, feel free to do so in the next 48 hours, but just ensuring that we have as many responses as possible. Moving onwards with the agenda, that brings us forward to, we have no guest speakers, so straight on to announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Vice President, External Affairs.
The involvement restriction policy was signed today and is officially a binding document, and so the faculties who have signed on as of yet, the big four, so that's arts, science, engineering, and management. Well, not management yet, actually. They need to come and sign it. So it's all good. It's all good. That's to say, if any other faculty wants to be a part of this, essentially the document allows for information sharing across faculty such that if someone is banned from, quote, all events, that actually becomes enforceable. Just get in contact with me and we can work that out. I already have space for medicine and education, but we can design a separate contract to bring other people in as well.
Thank you very much. Are there any other announcements? Vice President Internal.
Hello? Cool. First of all, thanks for everyone who came out last night at Hype Night. A lot of familiar faces were there, and a lot of familiar names are on rosters, so that's good. Second of all, I apologize for that. That's a hype scum thing. It's all water, and if anyone's being disruptive, they're losing every single point they've gained, plus some, so don't worry about that. That is under check, and they've all been told to behave. Yes.
Thank you. Other announcements? Vice President, External Affairs.
Some of you may have noticed infrastructures are being set up for faculty mobilizations, that's to say general assemblies. Very, very open to having conversations about this because it seems as though there's a bit more that needs to be discussed. Essentially, because faculties systematically reach every undergraduate student between them all, it's a very good consultative forum for people to discuss issues like Bill 21 and climate strikes. So keep your eyes open as climate activists on campus are looking to mobilize for another strike. So, be in contact, ask questions, and let's have a discussion about general assemblies.
Thank you. Councillor Fecky? I'll give it to you to whatever you want to say.
Thanks. So 3 years and a day ago, there was a shooting at a Quebec mosque. 6 people died. 6 women were widowed. 17 children were orphaned. Many more injured, and an entire community was scarred forever. But also that motivated other individuals to do the same acts. Just under a year ago, the same thing happened in New Zealand, and the shooter there had the name of the shooter here on their guns. So I would like to request a minute of silence, but first I would like to ask all of us to think of the ways that we could stop this from happening. Just having events for remembrance is nice, but it's not going to just cut it. We all have to contribute to stopping this hate from spreading, this ignorance, and these hateful acts. If you have anything to ask, just ask any Muslim you know, ask any individual, and try your best to end this ignorance from spreading. I feel like this is as our duties as student leaders, as students in McGill, as human beings to stop this from happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will observe a moment of silence. All counselors' laptops closed and phones, if not off desk, flipped over. Thank you very much. Are there any other announcements from councillors this evening? Vice President, External Affairs.
The Quebec Student Union has announced that $197 million per year will be reinvested into post-secondary education in Quebec. The current mobilization strategy is to ask the Minister of Education to have it invested into financial aid for students. Our own policy on accessible education requires us to advocate instead for investment into lowering the rate of tuition to move away from a neoliberal system towards free tuition for all. Again, very happy to have a conversation about this during question period or during my report.
Thank you very much. Any other announcements? Vice President Finance.
Okay, hi everyone. Speaker Jamal, it is your last Legislative Council. That's wild. I met you, was it September last year, before learning how to do all of this and getting involved in all of this and staying up until midnight multiple times. Firstly, thank you for teaching me. I genuinely thought that you were 2 years older than me when I met you, and it turns out that you're younger than me, which is kind of worrying. You're also graduating before me, so you know what, fair. I think I speak on behalf of everyone here when I say thank you for all you've put into the SSMU. Thank you for keeping these councils as short as they can be. Thank you for keeping us in check. Thank you for stopping us from going after each other. Thank you for making this a better place to be in, to debate in, and all of that. And that also comes from the SMU staff as well in the office. Thankfully, you'll still be around a little bit because your presence will be greatly missed. So I have a couple cards here for you. Some are from the office staff, some are from councillors, or I think 2 are from council and 1's from the office staff, if I'm right. Well, yeah.
We're at our 5 minutes for announcements. No, we are at 5 minutes, but I don't care. I said a little bit last time, but sincerely, it's been an incredible pleasure and a joy to be able to work with all of you this year, and also for those of you that have been here longer. Unfortunately, Andre Lemay is not here, but I've worked with him since fall 2017, and goodness, it's been a ride. So I'll still be around as governing documents researcher. I would encourage all of you to get involved with CGRC. It is a committee that affects you all, and don't think you've seen the last of me. I'll be coming back to present at Legislative Council with more CGRC reports that I hope will take up even more time for debate and questions. For those of you that gave me cards and for those of you that sent me well wishes, I do sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much. Councillor Chase.
All right, we do have a special, I did prepare a special surprise for you. So all counselors should now, or most counselors should have a special button of your likeness, Hussein, in order to honor you. Oh, you never got one? Do you? Here. We have a few more that we can pass out. So, but yes, thank you very much for your service, Hussein. It is greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much. I'm even more touched than I was a minute ago, so thank you all so much. On substantive announcements, for those of you that are at SSMU Legislative Council for the first time, there's only one bathroom on this floor, and it is a male identifying bathroom. For the VP internal, if you need to excuse yourself, you may. For the time that we are in McConnell 603, it is a gender neutral bathroom, but if you feel more comfortable with single-use stalls, you can take the elevator down 2 floors and down the hallway. Any further announcements this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on with the agenda to question period. Are there any questions? Opportunity for councillors and members of the gallery to ask questions to councillors and officers. Councillor Duss.
We're gonna miss you a lot. That's not a question, but do you have any idea of who's gonna replace you? Even though you're irreplaceable, but you know.
No, so I'm very much replaceable. Second of all,
No.
second of all, there is currently a job posting for the position of Speaker of Council. The application deadline is the 3rd of February. I believe interviews will be conducted by the HR staff at SMU, plus either the governance manager or president, or perhaps both. I'm not sure how many applications have been received or whether interviews have started, but the application closes on the 3rd of February. Then there is still the speaker on call, which if there's a gap between kind of my departure and then the next full speaker coming in, the speaker on call can fill in for a meeting if necessary. So I assume you'll be probably one of the first to know, you as council. Any other questions? Seeing no further questions, we'll move onwards then to our next recess. How convenient. For consent item approval, councillors, if you can go to your voting document list. For those of you that don't know, and for those of you that may have just want a refresher, before we proceed to doing formal question period and debate on all of the motions, we just look to see if any of the motions have enough support from councillors just to pass them without having to go through question period and debate, and we call that consent approval. So if even one person does not vote to approve a motion during the consent vote, you don't know, we don't know who the person is that voted no, but if even one person votes no, then we'll do the regular question period debate. If everybody votes to approve, we can skip question period debate and we'll just move right on with the agenda. So the form is open for all the motions on the agenda this evening. So you can make your way there and complete the form. We'll take a brief recess at 1850, and we'll come back at 1855.
Yes. It's actually pretty easy. All you need to do is just cut the piece of paper. You just put film on.
I'm going to announce the closure of the consent vote in 1 minute.
Oh, when he said button maker, I thought you had a person to make buttons. He knows. I have my own buttons. And my own seamstress. They get that, though, don't worry. They get a recess every 2 hours in accordance with Quebec labor law.
The consent vote is now closed. None of the motions passed by consent. Councillors, this is a tradition at this point, so let's keep it going. We'll move now to business arising. 13A, motion regarding amendments to the internal regulations of student groups. This was brought forward as a notice of motion at the previous meeting, and so has already been motivated. We'll now enter directly into question period Are there any questions? VP Finance? Side conversations? Councillor Wright? Side conversations? Point of personal privilege? Okay, so just VP Finance. So, motion regarding amendments to the internal regulations of student groups has already been moved and seconded and was motivated at the previous meeting. Question period. Are there any questions? Councillor Chase.
Will the VP Student Life retain a list of non-SMU members who will be who will be participating in this process?
VP Student Life.
So we do require everyone to submit their kind of people who make decisions using the student group information form at the beginning of the year.
Other questions? Les autres questions? Seeing no further questions, we'll move to debate. Individuals wanting to speak to the motion, either for or against. Seeing nobody for debate, we'll move on to a vote. Councillors, this is in your voting documents list. We are at item, we're at motion regarding amendments to the internal regulations of student groups 2020-0116. Bear with me for just a second. And voting is now open. You can borrow the computer of somebody next to you. That's a counselor. Yeah.
It'll say, yeah. Well, no, there's been extra items added.
Control, delete, shut down the computer.
Yeah, because it got added.
Reload your whole computer.
I'll announce the closure of voting in 30 seconds. Voting is now closed. 26 in favor, 2 abstaining, and unopposed. The motion is carried. Moving on to 13B, motion regarding amendments to the effective committees policy 2020-0116. This is brought forward as a notice of motion at the previous meeting of Legislative Council on the 16th of January, and so has already been motivated at that time. We'll now enter question period. Are there any questions on the motion? Councillor Chase.
Do we have a list of committees that will be affected by this policy?
Vice President External.
Yep, it's in the section impact of decision and next steps.
Thank you. Other questions? I see no further Senator Garneau.
Since the groups will be sort of like organizing those meetings, will they receive more funding to organize those meetings? Will they be more lenient towards funding to groups?
VP External.
So if you take a look at the internal regulations of finance, there's already secured funding for those groups, and in effect, most of those groups have a dedicated fund for them. So you have the equity fund for the equity committee, the charity fund for the community engagement committee, and so on. Basically, the amendments just recognize that in fact, if those committees are getting such large amounts of funding, and in fact they have more funding than any of the executive expense accounts, fun fact, so that there's just a duty for them to not behave like a glorified club and instead to just bring in other actors on campus. So for example, the Community Engagement Committee should be dialoguing with the Arts Community Engagement Committee and CASM, etc. So nothing really changes in the operation and leniency. Like they're still enshrined under various policies and committees, terms of references. It's just recognition that they should be dialoguing with external groups as well.
Thank you. Other questions? I see no further questions, so we'll move into debate. Individuals wanting to speak to the motion, either for or against. Councillor Kay.
My response references particularly the section on the Equity Caucus. What does equity mean to this council? Equity means being fair and impartial, giving voice to all the people who experience some sort of disadvantage. The motion as it currently stands makes reference to groups that only represent a limited segment of the McGill student body and minority groups, and there is no guarantee that other groups will be invited, represented, or consulted. Only one of the official member groups of the Solidarity Alliance McGill, who was consulted, represents an ethnicity, while all others represent political opinions. There historically has not been a commitment to representing the full diversity of the student body at this university within equity circles. We need clarity to understand
15 seconds.
Which groups will be included in these committees, and assurance that this will not be used to represent certain groups of the student body and systematically exclude other minority groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other points of debate? Vice President, External Affairs.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, this came up as well during the discussion on Equity Caucus, right? Like we said, we don't want to just have a seat reserved for BSN, but not one for MSA and not one for ASN. Like, this is a sort of a difficulty which needs to be addressed specifically within the Equity Committee and with the Equity Commissioners. Like, I think that is what you're talking about, and not so much when it comes to the Community Engagement Committee, etc. For sure. And there are voices at this university when we talk about equity which are privileged, right? Like, the Associate Provost for Equity is a white woman, and of course, like, equality for women is obviously like an equity consideration, but it's not the only one either. And there are certain groups which are just generally not included in McGill conversations about equity. I think there's a recognition of that fact. I think certainly some of the McGill Joint Board Senate Committee on Equity subcommittees recognize that fact. And part of what this change does is it requires our equity committee, which currently has the problems you're citing, like I don't think this introduces new ones, it forces them to get into dialogue with those committees and work towards improvements by sharing best practices.
Thank you very much. Other debate. I'd invite others to speak, just to avoid it becoming a back and forth conversation, to have a holistic kind of dialogue and discussion. Anybody else wanting to comment on this motion? If not, I'm happy to give the floor back to Councillor Kay, and so I will.
So just to clarify, in putting together this motion, and like the section on consultations completed, did you consult, or did the writers of this motion consult other groups that weren't in the Solidarity Alliance McGill?
Vice President, External Affairs.
Yep, the Indigenous Affairs Commissioner and the Sustainability Commissioners, as cited, are consulted. I'll just point out the continuous reference to Solidarity Alliance McGill. Solidarity Alliance McGill is not itself considered in the motion, so certain members who sit on Solidarity Alliance McGill have overlapping with equity considerations and equity groups on campus, and so the idea would be to make sure that not all of them, but the ones to whom that applies are included in the conversations around equity committee, etc. But Solidarity Alliance McGill is not recognized as its own body as part of the consultation process. That's why it says different groups on campus that compose the Solidarity Alliance.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh. Other comments on this motion? Councillor Chase.
I know this isn't question period, but I guess which groups within Solidarity Alliance will be the ones who will be who this motion is intended for?
Thank you. Others wishing to speak? Vice President, External Affairs.
Permission to read from the papers. I'm going to read through the Constitution of Solidarity Alliance McGill, which is publicly available, to list the groups that would be. Okay, I just have to find it on Facebook. Please excuse me.
So, sorry. I'll just ask. So I guess the Vice President of External Affairs has made a request to read from the papers. Basically, all that means is that they have requested the ability to read a document. Is somebody willing to second that? Councillor Wu, thank you very much. The motion is granted by unanimous consent. So does anybody oppose? See none. So we'll grant the Vice President of External Affairs unanimous consent to read from the papers.
The following campus groups are recognized as formal members of Solidarity Alliance McGill: Quebec Public Interest Research Group, Socialist Fight Back at McGill, Divest McGill, STAND, which is Students Taking a New Direction for Prison Justice, McGill Students for New Democratic Party, Independent Jewish Voices of McGill. The following groups are observer status members of the Solidarity Alliance McGill and are thus to be kept abreast of all activities of Solidarity Alliance and formally invited to all meetings: the Daily Publication Society and its imprints, the Black Students Network, Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy, McGill Students in Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights, the Union for Gender Empowerment. So not all of those are equity-seeking groups. This is true. And again, I'll reiterate it in the motion, it doesn't say that the Solidarity Alliance McGill groups are themselves synonymous with equity groups. So to make specific ones more prominent, although obviously, like, I'm not an expert on equity and I'm not paid to be an expert on equity, so I would defer to people who have perhaps a little more expertise and training in this regard. But I would point out specifically Independent Jewish Voices, Black Student Network, and possibly SPHR as equity-seeking groups on campus.
Thank you very much. Other individuals want to speak to this motion? Councillor Kay.
Is there a way to increase the amount of like equity-seeking groups or reevaluate the list of equity-seeking groups?
I'll remind this is not question period, so you're not entitled to an answer, but I'll ask if anybody else wants to speak to the motion. Vice President External Affairs.
So, again, Solidarity Alliance McGill is not the same thing as the Equity Committee. These are some of the many groups that are equity seeking on campus. An obvious other example would be the Muslim Students Association. Like, again, this motion does not exclude those or say that it's only Solidarity Alliance McGill. Solidarity Alliance McGill isn't considered explicitly in the motion. It's considered as a forum where consultation in some sense could have been done. So I would say it's probably up to the equity commissioners to make the determination at the beginning of the year of who is doing equity work. There's a sort of degree of collective understanding as to what that means. If we wish to nail down all of the equity-seeking groups on campus right now, I think that'd be a bit odd. I think we could do it, or we could give that to the equity committee to do before the end of the year. That's probably fine, but I don't really understand where this discussion is going.
Thank you. Other debate on this motion? I see no further debate on the motion, and so we'll proceed to a vote. Councillors, this is item 13B, motion regarding amendments to the effective committee's policy 2020-0116. It is in your voting documents list, and voting is now open. Does anybody need more time? Councillor Chase? Point of parliamentary inquiry.
It was my understanding that the Finance Committee last meeting postponed a motion to add members of its committee. Do you know what is the status of that?
We can bring that forward this evening for the agenda. No problem there. I will announce the closure of voting. And the results of the vote are as follows: 21 in favor, 2 opposed, 6 abstaining. The motion carries. That brings us to item 13C, motion regarding adoption of the SSMU Mental Health Policy and Plan 2019-0109. This was submitted as a notice of motion at the previous meeting and has already been motivated, and so will now enter question period. I will note for councillors that the SSMU Mental Health Commissioner is present in the gallery, and is happy to answer questions if you have them. So with that, are there any questions on the motion regarding adoption of the SMU mental health policy and plan? I see no questions. We'll move to debate. Individuals wanting to speak to the motion, either for or against. VP Student Life.
I submitted an amendment.
You did.
Although the seconder is not here, so I don't know how that works.
You've got a new seconder. So wait till we see the amendment. Germane to this motion? Once voting is closed, the motion is dispensed with. So there are just 3 changes, so bear with me here. It might actually be more helpful. Would somebody willing to motion for a brief 2-minute recess? Councillor Freed, thank you. Second, VP Internal, thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? Yeah, we'll take a brief 2-minute recess.
Let's include that.
I can't amend the policy and plan because it's not in appendix properly. It's linked separately. I can't edit it.
We're rather big. Please do. Give me so much more time.
No. Once the motion's been voted on, it's dispensed with.
I guess I'm good at governance award. Whatever. The only kind of snap today was this fit. Crossbeard, bus fabric. Who's your button supplier? Sullivan's coming in hot. You make them yourself? How do you make them?
I said 2 minutes.
No,
Someone got the elevator.
And why do you have a button making machine? And what's the cost like for you to make buttons? For lots of years? So they just come in as like patches, basically. And you just I wouldn't wear my face. I wouldn't wear your face everywhere. Publicize it? They publicize it? No, like across like U.S. border security, and they're just like. You're big enough to the next GC. I can come speak at the Asian band.
It's gonna turn into a GC when it doesn't reach 4. Yeah, that's not just because it's
No, I mean like
when?
at your next GC, ask them to send in an email which publicizes it. Unless is people need to do classroom announcements to get them to come out,
Yeah.
which the executive should be doing if they're called a GA. No, but like it's the duty of the executive to help us as a GA. Every constitution has who's supposed to do that. So if they're not fulfilling their mandate, that becomes a problem, right?
Has been a problem, I think.
Well, so I would raise that to the attention of the executives. The next strike would be March 20th.
Yeah, that was the date. I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw something about that.
Yeah,
Is that a Bill 21 specific thing?
March 20th.
Is it called Law 21 now?
It's law 12.
It's Law 12.
Yeah, but we call
It's
it
been
Bill
more than
21
2 minutes, so
for a
council will have
couple
the
reasons.
opportunity to leave and come back. We'll call back to order at 1914. The Vice President Student Life is moving an amendment. The amendment, if you open the plan, is shown in red. So specifically, I'll read out the amendment points just so everybody is clear. The amendments are as follows. On page 14 of the plan, under formation of each committee, the Health and Dental Review Committee is added. On page 15, under allyship, under the general header committee objectives, the sentence is amended to read, when appropriate, collaborate on mental and physical health related advocacy initiatives of other student groups. Such projects shall include but are not limited to involvements in the inclusivity and accessibility of health insurance for all McGill students, increased specialization of care for marginalized student populations, and the strengthening of health accommodations for students through the Office of Students with Disabilities and the Office of the Dean of Students. Also on page 15, under the heading Committee Objectives Education, a new point is added, create educational campaigns surrounding student health insurance plans and coverage available. And finally, on page 20, the addition of the Health and Dental Review Committee to the list of bodies. So the Vice President Student Life is moving that amendment. Is there a second to that amendment? I'll take Councillor Budkar. Thank you very much. Councillor Ramey, do you have a parliamentary inquiry? Can you wait for a microphone?
I think appropriate is spelled wrong on page 16. Appropriate? I don't know. I'm gonna submit that to the floor.
It's an optional color.
We'll note that change. Thank you very much. Councillor Mackey.
Apparently, the sound on the live stream isn't working.
Councillor Franceschini, that comment, you know the rules. VP Internal, that's going to be an official warning for you. And so with that, the VP Student Life has moved the amendment. Is there a second to the amendment? I'll take Councillor Budkar as previously. Thank you. And so the amendment's moved and seconded. Debate on the amendment. Seeing no debate on the amendment, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your placards. Opposed? Abstaining? And the amendment carries. We'll return to debate on the main motion. Not sure if the VP Student Life wants to give the floor to the Mental Health Commissioner to explain the plan at all as part of debate. You may.
I will yield my time.
To the Mental Health Commissioner. So, could you please spell your first and last name and state your personal pronouns if you'd like to do so?
Olivia Frank, Olivia, Frank, Frank, personal pronoun she, her.
The floor is yours.
Oh, go. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm the SSMU Mental Health Commissioner. This policy was put together by my team and I after months of work on the standards of practice across Canada, the post-secondary or the Mental Health Commission's post-secondary standards, and the recent data that came from the National College Health Assessment Survey that was completed in 2017 and 2018. We did a lot of work with various stakeholder groups across campus to try to make a policy that was as well-rounded and appropriate and representative of what mental health right now is like on campus and what we hope it will be. Most importantly, I think we amended a little bit of the structure of what the Mental Health Commission, Commissioner and committees would look like, as well as
decreased it to a 3-year plan because mental health changes rapidly on campus and across Canada, so it will be amended much quicker, which we think is more appropriate.
Thank you very much. Other individuals wanting to speak to the motion in debate, either for or against? Vice President, External Affairs.
I'm just wondering why certain advocacy-specific actionables were not included. So, for example, some of the more severe critiques of the Rossi Wellness Hub, as well as advocacy being done at the Quebec-wide level. So, for example, the Quebec government has indicated they might be holding parliamentary committee meetings to discuss a binding post-secondary standard. So just wondering why some of that wasn't included in the policy.
SSMU Mental Health Commissioner.
So there is a point that does include that students should be advocates beyond just the school level. Under allyship, encourage and support other universities and organizations when lobbying for improvements for larger health institutional practices. We largely wanted to keep the specifics of what that looks like dependent person to person. There is a lot of empowerment that goes into having a different mental health commissioner each year, and so having that language be direct but vague in a way allows mental health commissioners to still maintain autonomy in their decision-making practices. In terms of addressing the hub in particular, those difficulties that you mentioned relating to its first couple months of operation, I think for a SSMU mental health policy, again, not being a McGill mental health policy, it's important to differentiate that the mental health commissioner and commission or committees do not work for the hub, and so their role is not necessarily to constantly be working in direct allyship with the hub, but rather to kind of maintain the different relationships that are going to develop as the hub develops as well. So it's its first year out of what is initially going to be a 7-year plan. So by maintaining, I guess, a neutral policy, we can hope that the relationships between the hub and students is not determined by what the first year looked like.
Thank
Does
you.
that make sense?
Other debate on this motion. VP Finance.
Hi, so this is with regard to the motion, but a more general theme. A lot of fees are coming to referendum this semester. I have no idea how many. I've heard of at least 8, 9 minimum. So if you are planning a motion with a fee or bringing a fee to referendum, please let me know before you bring it to council. That's something for this plan and everything else, just in general, so that we can kind of see where we can manage and maybe not have to charge students extra where possible, because a lot of what happens is that we pass a fee that doesn't get used properly until 4 or 5 years down the line. Thanks.
Thank you. Other debate on this motion? I see no further debate, so we'll proceed to a vote. Councillor says item 13C, motion regarding adoption of the SSMU mental health policy and plan. Voting is now open. I'll just take this opportunity to announce as well to councillors that the live stream audio should be working. There was just a lag between the end of the recess and the resumption, so it should be all good to go. I'll announce the closure of voting. Oh, Councillor Wright. Voting is now closed. 26 in favor, none opposed, 1 abstaining. The motion carries. And so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Side conversations, councillors, are not permitted. 13 D, motion regarding the adoption of the gendered and sexual. Yep, as well. I'll note for proxy for Senator Lametti, please do not call attention to members waiting on a point of personal privilege. I will get to them. That's generally out of order. And so, item 13D, motion regarding the adoption of the Gender and Sexual Violence Committee Terms of Reference, 2201-16. This was moved as a notice of motion at the previous meeting of Legislative Council, and so has already been motivated. We'll proceed to question period. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, we'll move to a vote, or to debate. All those wishing to speak to the motion, either for or against. I see no debate on this motion, and so we'll proceed directly onwards to a vote. Councillors, this is item 13D, motion regarding adoption of the Gendered and Sexual Violence Committee Terms of Reference. Voting is now open. And we'll note for the minutes that the VP Student Life departing at... Okay, the VP Student Life will note the departure at 1924. Councillor Morgan. Temporary departure at Councillor Morgan at 1925. Vice President, External Affairs.
On a point of order, I was just reading inside my procedural points, and a point of personal privilege does warrant an interruption. So I just would request that be struck from the minutes that that's out of order.
No, I'm going to overrule that. It does warrant an interruption from the person on the point of personal privilege, not from another councillor.
Thank you.
So the point of order, Vice President External, is not well taken. And so with that, I'll announce the closure of voting. 23 in favor, none opposed, 1 abstaining. The motion carries. We'll now move onwards. The Vice President Finance, I assume, will be moving to suspend the rules to add the motion to appoint members to the Finance Committee. So moved. Is there a second? Councillor proxy for Councillor Platt. Thank you very much. And so I'll give the floor to the VP Finance.
Yeah, so... Oh, wait.
Just on the reason for the suspension.
Oh, yeah,
the rules.
so last council we said that we'd add members to the Finance Committee. The motion also specified that if you were on the Financial Ethics Committee that was struck, you'd have priority. So that's Councillors Danda Moody, Fucky, and I'm missing one. Who have I forgotten? I missed someone. Would you, if the speaker can bring that up, that'd be great. And I guess yeah, that's the reason.
So while we wait for the motion to be pulled up, the motion to suspend the rules for the addition of that motion has been moved and seconded. It is not debatable. I'll ask all those in favor, please raise your placards. Opposed? And we'll allow the suspension of the rules. That's the one, VP Finance. So can you, Danda Moody, Faki, and Eisner. Eisner is not here, but we have 2 of the 3. And so with that, I suppose, be it resolved, I guess, do you want to do an open nomination process? VP Finance?
Well, I don't know if all of those three councils want to be on this committee. It's up to them.
So I'll just ask. Councillor Dandamoody, would you like to be on the new finance committee? Councillor Faki? No, just it's fine. Okay. I'll ask if other councillors wish to be on the finance committee. Councillor Mackey? Okay. And do you need a third? Or do you want to just take Councillor Eisner? Did he express interest earlier?
I don't know if he's aware that this is a thing, to be honest.
Councillor Feki? Okay, so I have a nomination then for Councillor Mackey, Councillor Feki, and Councillor Dandamoody. Anybody else want to put their name forward? Okay, so I've been just asked to make a couple announcements. Number one, side conversations and the rule against them is not just me being mean. It is picked up in the live stream and in the recording, which makes transcribing the minutes later much more difficult. So you're doing a disservice to the recording secretaries. And number two, it's captured in the live stream, which is disservice to your constituents watching the live stream from home. So please avoid side conversations for the duration of the meeting. It's not just a rule to be punitive, it's a rule to ensure that meetings remain accessible. Number two, if you are in the line of the camera of the live stream, be aware that what's on your screen is visible to everyone watching. And so you should conduct yourselves appropriately. And so we'll note the return of the VP student life at 1930. The motion is be it resolved that Councillors Faki, Mackey, and Dandamoody be appointed to the Finance Committee. Is somebody willing to move that motion? Councillor Wu, thank you. Second, Councillor Wright, thank you very much. And the return of Councillor Morgan at 1930. We'll proceed to question period. Are there any questions on that motion? Hearing no questions, any debate? Seeing no debate, we'll proceed to a vote. This will be a placard vote because we don't have a voting form ready. All those in favor, please raise your placards. Can you count that way? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I see 28. All those opposed? Abstaining? Noting one abstention, 2 abstentions? 1 abstention. The motion is carried. Moving on to Vice President External Affairs.
I'd like to motion to suspend the rules to add a late motion that was just circulated by the President. Or notice of motion, my apologies.
That notice of motion does not have a seconder, so it cannot be brought to the floor. I mean, technically, if you suspend the rules to find a seconder, then fine. So do you want to do that? Vice President External Affairs so moved to suspend the rules to both find a seconder for the motion and to introduce it. So moved by Vice President External Affairs. Second, Councillor Ramey. Thank you very much. This is not debatable. All those in favor of suspending the rules to that effect, please raise your placards. Procedural opposed. So done. And so the motion is notice. Is it coming forward as a notice or a motion? Notice. Notice of motion regarding amendments to the internal regulations of elections and referenda, 2020-0130, moved by the SMU president. Is somebody willing to second? I can't let the person motivate it or tell you what it's about until I get a seconder, which is weird, but it's been circulated. So if a councillor wants to step forward and add their name to it, now's the time. No? Okay. Any councillor willing to add their name as a seconder to the motion? Councillor Wu? Okay. Okay, councillors, so the notice of motion regarding amendments to the internal regulations of elections and referenda, a member of the executive to motivate the motion in the absence of the president? VP External, perhaps? Vice President External Affairs.
Yeah, so these changes were brought forward by Elections SMU, so that's the Chief Electoral Officer and Deputy Electoral Officer themselves. Part of it moves Elections SMU away from the portfolio of the President to the portfolio of the Governance Manager, which is useful for an independent body such as Elections SMU. Otherwise, there are provisions about disqualification in the event that someone standing for election as an officer doesn't meet with their incumbent. It says that they will be disqualified. So obviously, like, you should inform yourself about a position before you run for position. Then additional provisions about campaigns committees, which you're encouraged to read before the next meeting of council.
Thank you very much. The motion has been motivated. It will be accepted as a notice of motion to come forward at the first meeting of Legislative Council in February. We'll move onwards now to new business. 14A, notice of motion regarding adoption of the SMU Francisization Plan. The president is not here, and also Senator Lametti is not here. A member of the executive or perhaps proxy for Senator Lametti if you'd like to. Proxy for Senator Lametti?
One of these days I'll do that, right? Allô, bonjour tout le monde. Ça, c'est une motion pour adopter un plan pour bien intégrer les processus de translation et aussi la reconnaissance du communauté francophone ici dans le SMU. Nous sommes une coopération dans la province de Québec, alors nous avons certaines obligations dessous la charte française et les autres projets de loi. Aussi, nous avons une obligation de représenter la communauté francophone et d'assurer que la communauté francophone peut comprendre le processus de l'ESMO et de participer dans l'ESMO. Alors, ça, c'est un plan de le faire. Il y a aussi un plan, par exemple, un budget dans l'appendix jusqu'à la plan. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. The motion has been given notice and council has been given notice thereof. The motion will come for question period and debate at the first meeting in February. Moving on to 14, I guess now C, notice of motion regarding amendments to the committee terms of reference, 2020-0130. That motion was moved by the VP Student Life.
Yes, so this is to reflect the fact that the mental health commissioner should have a seat at what is that called? The Health and Dental Review Committee.
Thank you very much. The motion, council has given notice of the motion. It shall come for question period and debate at the first meeting in February. That brings us to the end of business. We'll move on to reports by committees. Vice President External Affairs.
I'd like to motion to suspend the rules for the appointment of a new member of the Housing Committee now that the social work representative has been removed from council.
Moving to suspend the rules, is there somebody willing to second to that effect? Councillor Franceschini, thank you very much. This requires a two-thirds majority. All those in favor, please raise your placards. Opposed? The rules are suspended for the addition of a late motion. Vice President External Affairs, you want to make the motion to read? Do a nomination process?
Just a straight nomination process.
Okay. Those individuals that have interest in sitting on the housing committee, Affordable Student Housing Committee, VP Finance, name forward. So if you Vice President Finance, others, Councillor Freed, there's one seat. Okay. Any other nominations of candidacies? Councillor Ramey, okay. Councillor Kay. They have to be here. Well, are they a counselor? Yes. Do they want to be on the committee? Yes. Okay. Can I second the nomination? We're going to be doing a vote. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to have that whole conversation just struck the minutes. So I have the VP Finance withdrawing. Okay, VP Finance withdraws. So Councillor Freed and Councillor Ramey will compete for the one seat. Councillors, it will be just like we did all other committee allocations. I'll give each of you 1 minute to speak. You don't have to use the entire minute. And then councillors will do a vote just by show of placards. You may vote twice, so you can vote for both. If everybody votes for both of them, it becomes a problem. So, use your votes judiciously. Anyway, so Councillor Freed.
Hello? Okay. So I think that it would be appropriate, considering that I'm the residences representative, for me to sit on this committee, considering that it affects my constituency, and that I am myself a first year looking for housing, and I think that it would benefit myself and others that I know within the first year residence community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ramey, you have 1 minute.
as a relatively recently joined member of LC, because I joined in October, I currently do not sit on any committee to my knowledge, so I would love to sit on a committee. I have the time relative to all you guys by the fact that I don't sit on other committees. And also, this is of particular interest to the School of Environment because we have houses on both campuses. So I feel that my constituency covers a lot of ground, literally, in the McGill community that would be a proper outlet for expression on this committee. I would like to yield my time to the chair.
Thank you very much. And so, councillors, you have heard the candidate statements. There is one seat on the committee. If you support Councillor Freed being on the Affordable Student Housing Committee, please raise your placards and keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19. I see 19. And if you support Councillor Ramey being on the Affordable Student Housing Committee, please raise your placards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I see 11. Yes. I said that earlier. So 11, Councillor Ramey.
Sorry, where do we settle on the voting twice?
Councillors may vote twice.
Cool, thank you, sorry.
Yeah. Would you like that done again? If you support Councillor Freed being on the Affordable Student Housing Committee, please raise your placards and keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I see 21. And if you support Councillor Ramey being on the Affordable Student Housing Committee, please raise your placards. I see 12. Councillor Freed has the majority. And so, Vice President External, would you like to make the motion on the agenda, which is now 14D, motion to appoint Councillor Freed to the Affordable Student Housing Committee?
Yes, and just to say that the next meeting is next Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you. So moved. Is there a second for the motion? Councillor Morali, thank you very much. Any questions? Any debate? Briefly, for Councillor Ramey, you don't have a committee. You can talk to me if it's by tomorrow, or the next speaker who can allocate you to a committee based on availabilities if you have interest in those. Okay, and so with that, seeing no debate, Councillor Faki. Nope.
Is question period for a notice of motion during the notice of motion or the following meeting?
The following meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So seeing no further debate, we'll proceed to a vote. This will be a placard vote because we don't have a form ready. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your placards. Opposed? Abstaining? We'll note 1 abstention, 2 abstentions, and so the motion is carried. Moving on to 15, reports by committees. Oh, one against as well. Executive Committee. Somebody to read the report of the Executive Committee in lieu of the President? VP Student Life?
These are the motions that we approved at Executive Committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the Executive Committee? I see no questions on the report of the Executive Committee. And so that's the end of reports by committees. We'll move on to reports by councillors. Councillor Flaherty, clubs.
Hi guys. Sorry for admitting my report late. I forgot that I had to report this week, so if you didn't get a chance to read my report. I'm sorry, but as you can see, it's pretty short. We've had a few clubs committee meetings already this semester, mostly approving applications and constitutions. In terms of constituent affairs, there hasn't been too much going on, but we are going to be working in clubs committees going forward on the relationship between SMU and clubs, just to see where we can maybe facilitate communication better and make it more collegial. So if you have any suggestions for clubs policy, or even if you have any questions about the relationship between clubs and SMU, you can always email me at clubsrep2@smu.ca. But yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the report of the clubs committee or clubs representative? Seeing no questions, we'll move onwards to 16B, Councillor Patzer, nursing.
Oh, it's not mine. I also submitted mine late. Like I just submitted it probably like 45 minutes ago because I forgot I was recording. So I apologize to those who can't review it. Anyway, I hope you can. I hope it can be displayed. Anyway, it's very short. It's mostly on constituent affairs. Recently, we approved the Nursing Undergraduate Research Fund budget. So this provides funding to students to attend conferences. It was actually reduced by 10%, which is a huge cut, honestly. So we weren't able to afford as many students to go to our conferences this year. There's really not too much going on. Our forum for health policy, student health policy, Quebec, we decided on our theme for this year's conference as healing environments. So if anyone has any suggestions on how we can create policy to impact mental, physical, and behavioral health, you can honestly send some suggestions my way and I'll bring it up at our summit this year. In terms of SMU, committees haven't met this semester and I could not attend last semester. And I do have stage in the evenings, so I will have to be finding a proxy for my privileged council. So I apologize.
Thank you. We'll note the arrival of the SMU president at 1945. And so we'll go into question period on the report. Are there any questions on the report of the nursing representative? Seeing no questions, we'll move onwards to Councillor Garneau, Senate Caucus.
Hi everyone. So yeah, not much happened since I last reported, as it was at the end of the semester, but we've had 4 Senate caucuses, a couple of guest speakers, including McGill admin celebrities such as Martin Gauthier and Fabrice Labo that actually came this week, so I didn't have time to add it, but yeah, we had great discussions on the mental wellness hub and admissions, and yeah. We also submitted our semesterly reports for every committees. So if you're interested in literally any committees that we sit on, every semester there's a large report that is submitted and posted on the SMU University Affairs website, which describes all the activities that took place during the semester. Yeah, we also submitted our individual semester reports that are going to be sent to accountability committee. There were 2 senates since my last report. We asked a couple of good questions. If you'd like to go through them, most notably what happened during Senate is we tried to get actual answers on McGill's refusal to divest from fossil fuels, which of course we did not get really good answers as usual. But yeah, personal projects, some notable ones. We've had Art Senator Chloe Kameni working on his Black Students Bill of Rights. Law Senator Adrienne Tessier, who was here today, who worked on a website for Know Your Rights campaign, who also led a really great campaign this semester if you didn't have the chance to see it. I'm also working on open educational resources with VP University Affairs Wilson and Education Senator Morong Yang. We now have a web page if you want to check it out. I also linked the full list of projects that we're working on as senators. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the report of the Senate Caucus representative? Seeing no questions, we'll move onwards on the agenda to item 16D, Councillor Wright, Science.
Sorry, can I have a
All right. Hi, everyone. My report is pretty self-explanatory. I'll just kind of highlight a few key things that have happened since the last time I reported, which I believe is mid-November. So we appointed Marjan Ghazi as the SUS president. That happened pretty recently. My office hours changed. There's just a summary of everything that we've passed at the last few general councils since I last gave a report. Science games just happened a couple weeks ago. It was very successful. Charity Week happened last semester, will be happening again this semester, date TBD. We're having a General Assembly on February 5th. After Hours is back. Academia Week is February 11th to 14th. The SUS Gala is February 15th. Tickets are selling very, very fast, so highly recommend coming. You should buy tickets soon. And yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the report of the science representative? Vice President External Affairs.
Just for clarity, is the General Assembly a regular General Assembly or a special General Assembly?
Councillor Wright.
This is just a regular General Assembly.
Thank you very much. Member from the gallery. So, you know the drill, microphone, first and last name, personal pronouns if you'd like to do so.
Asa Cohn, ASAKOHN. I feel like that should also be on file by now. Faculty of Science, masculine pronouns. I guess this is my last time probably seeking recognition from this speaker. I want to know what kind of work has the SUS done to publicize the General Assembly coming up to make sure it reaches quorum, maybe tabling posters, classroom announcements, if you know.
Councillor Wright.
To my knowledge, I don't know if we've done any classroom announcements yet, but all of the suggestions are very appreciatively taken.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Councillor Budkar, is that a question?
Did you know, just because I have to phrase this as a question, but SUS Gala just sold out, so 2 days.
The question is to whom and asking what?
Did you know that SUS Gala just sold out to the entire council?
Councillor Wright.
Can I answer that and add something else?
You can answer the question.
Okay. No, I did not know that. And I'm
Wonderful.
happy
Thank you
to
very
learn.
much. We're going to move onwards now to executive reports. Item 17A, report of the president. Point, Councillor Faki. The question period, well, we hit our time limit on the questions, yes. So unless you want a motion to extend question period. Okay. Report of the president.
Hi, folks. Apologies for being tardy. I was at the Board of Governors forum with students, so that explains my absence. I trust that everybody's had a chance to read my report. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the president? Councillor Marcoux.
Could you give us an update on the renovations in Schulich Library?
Mr. President.
Thank you. The Vice President University Affairs has the most up-to-date information with regards to this, but to the best of my knowledge, the project itself is delayed by 6 months from its currently stated end date of next summer, I believe, so that's another 6 months after. Concerning the project has only been in progress for 6 months. This is a significant delay, and we're currently working with the university to find alternative spaces to continue to fulfill that gap in study spaces for students. Hopefully, once the University Center opens, we'd be able to accommodate more study spaces, and the university could help us out with that.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Chase.
Is there a status for the hiring of the general manager?
Mr. President.
Yes, there is. So currently we have two very qualified candidates that we're in the process of interviewing. Essentially, to recap for everyone who might not know, last semester we attempted to find a general manager using our own internal processes. When that failed, we then moved on towards advertising using LinkedIn, Indeed, Charity Village, and found a short list of candidates from there. However, none of them were qualified enough to be general managers, so at that point we contracted out our headhunting to a headhunting firm, Kenneth Leadership, and they've been assisting us with this process since the beginning of December. From then on, they conducted interviews with many candidates. I believe there were probably 100 candidates who applied for the position. They whittled it down to a short list of 12, I want to say, for their interviews on their end, and then recommended a list of 4 candidates for us to interview by ourselves. From there, we whittled it down to the 2 that we have now. And so next week, we're going to be having interviews with those 2 candidates, and ideally, we'd have a general manager in place sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Thank you very much. Other questions on the report of the president? Councillor Dariani, or proxy for Councillor Dariani.
Hi. I was just wondering if there's like any update as to like the situation regarding the leaking of confidential information to the McGill Daily.
SMU President.
So there was a presentation of the board of report of the board of directors. I wasn't sure exactly what was explained, so perhaps
So the VP Finance gave a summary of the situation, but didn't read the report as it was presented. And then there were no questions that were raised, but I guess you're welcome to take questions on it during your report.
Sure. That is a statement that was authorized by the board of directors with regards to what happened with that situation. I don't have any particular update unless you have a more specific question that you would like to ask.
Do you want to ask a follow-up question, proxy, for Councillor Dariani? You're entitled to a follow-up question.
Just that, like, if the investigation leads to a conclusive answer, like, would there be action taken? Like, what would be the outcome, ramifications, etc.?
SMU President?
I really can't comment on what that investigation may or may not entail. But perhaps at a future legislative council, feel free to have one of the arts reps ask the same question.
Other questions on the report of the president? Proxy for Councillor Platt.
Back on the topic of the hiring of the general manager, what costs were associated with using a headhunter?
SMU President.
I don't believe I have the authorization to disclose that in public session.
Other questions? Councillor Chase, or is that the same question?
With regards to any investigations on confidential information, can you confirm that if there is an ongoing investigation or no?
SMU President?
I cannot comment at this time.
Proxy for Senator Lametti.
I'd just like the president to confirm that Kenneth Leadership was informed of SMU's obligations around equal equity employment and ensuring that a wide number of candidates from equity-seeking groups were considered for the position.
SMU President?
I can confirm that was the case. They were informed of our own internal hiring processes and in which employment equity is a priority for us, and they follow through with that commitment.
Thank you very much. Other questions on the report of the president? Councillor Franconcini? Microphone.
A whole decade. Anyways, this is more to do. Thanks. It's more to do with the report of the board of directors, but they said if any questions to follow it up to you. Is there any reasoning for why the board of directors did not follow the recommendations of the accountability committee regarding the suspension of the VP University Affairs? If you could go into a rationale behind that.
SMU President?
As far as I'm permitted to say, I can say that the board of directors took into account a variety of different factors with regards to their decision that they made, including the accountability report itself, the concerns or the input from the Vice President University Affairs, as well as other factors that were discussed, and they were all taken holistically.
Thank you very much. Other questions on the report of the president? Councillor Marcoux?
I'm sure we can get a bit more information than that if it's possible.
So you want more information on the previous question on the board's rationale? SMU President.
That's as far as I believe I'm able to go in public session. If people want to go into confidential, that's something I might be able to do.
And so with that, we've exhausted the time for questions on the report of the president. If somebody wants to motion to extend the time. Seeing no motion for extension, thank you very much, SMU President. This is a very nice juncture for us to take our first 10-minute recess as required by the loi sur le nombre de travail. And so at 19:58, we'll take a 10-minute recess. Councillors returning late does count as half an absence. Please return on time.
I'm sorry. What am I signing? change teams, eh? That's where I'm at on my thing.
That's why the people were being
This is gonna be so obvious right now, you know what I mean?
What?
Oh, mine is on this on I did that. I don't think of it.
Just walk.
You need to send me this. I've only been telling you yes.
I have a couple of
100%.
I'll send you your own custom templates.
This is off the record. I just want
Oh yeah, by the way.
Oh yeah. Listen, you think
But also, I want my name in the name. That's my goal.
do you have any idea how much confidence all these numbers I end up knowing when they come out? Someone else got there. I didn't know the general average maybe got published the last year. It was someone else. I was like, I just heard about it after it was published. I'm like, you're probably saying this shit. You can do like a lecture.
No, yeah, it was really funny. Beatrice, I was like really joking her, and she's like, this will be the end of the story with the next week. And I was like, I'm leaving, it's going. So guys, humor's a good cover.
It is. That's how I get through my life. And the rappers too.
For the record, though, I have managed to successfully not
Yeah,
publish
yeah.
an article about that meeting. So there's not an article published about that meeting, which is partly because I was just like, I did have so little work and didn't publish it. But it's also
Or not
because
outside.
now there's not a controversial article that I can.
I have a request. If you do an article on this meeting, can you include my joke about the new decade? I thought that was pretty
Yeah,
funny.
it was very funny.
Oh, 100%. I am going to write an article on that. And the thing is, I'm going to make the title SSMU convenes for the shortest session physically possible, only 2.5 hours.
Only 2.5 hours. Dude, I'd literally been trying to
Good for you.
That can be went to like 1:30 in the
And it probably, and it had no intention of stopping.
No, it would have kept going.
Like, that would have kept going until 5
Like that is what I earn respect for like student journalism. I'm like, if you're here during the same thing as we are, like, yeah, man, back to business. Chilling, crying, praying.
Chilling and then making the commentary more than some council. That is what actually qualifies you to run for arts.
2 minutes, councillors. 2 minutes to call back to order.
Being here, what makes you decide to change teams and go on this side of it?
Oh, I was going to run for president.
It's his last session. Really?
But I was overloaded with school. I was in a class where we were doing a week-long simulation. And it was like,
That's a crazy poly class.
yeah.
That sounds so
So I was
cool.
overloaded. So the time that I was like, right when it starts is right when campaigning starts. And I'm like, fuck, I can't do both of these. I'm doing like the third most important job in this entire city. I can't do that. So I basically dropped out and said, well, now it's too late to run for like art trips. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to run next year. And said, yeah, but now I'm running. Yeah.
Executive, I don't know if I can for. I can write my name down and they can see if they accept it. Like, I know I can't vote for reps, but I can vote for executive.
The time is now 20:08. I'm going to call us back to order. Councillors, please take your seats. Call back to order. You are now out of order. Moving onwards to item 17B, report of the Vice President, University Affairs. Another member of the executive to read the report of the VP University Affairs in her absence. VP Student Life, if you wouldn't mind. VP Student Life.
Oh, I'm running.
Okay, so I don't really know what Madeline does, but bear with me. So the Shag Shop has physically reopened, which is great. They have very affordable things they can get there. Previous special investigation for sexual violence has left the university. Oh yeah, so this is actually really important. It's been replaced with 2 short contract law firms, Ruben Tomlinson and Kane Lamar. And this was brought up in our meeting with the new interim Dean of Student Life, so we didn't know about it until that meeting. The Policy Against Sexual Violence Working Group, 1 out of 24. It's been combined with the Implementation Committee. It would be for 2 years. So there hasn't been any community consultation, but message her if you have feedback on Dean Colleen Cook Enrollment and Student Affairs Advisory Committee, Senate Steering Committee working groups, miscellaneous university meetings. So the Wellness Hub leadership team. Oh, this I actually know. So we discussed Keep Me Safe, and there was also the resignation of the Graduate Studies Local Wellness Advisor, role of the Hub Case Manager, and then being hung up on while on hold. So this should be now fixed, hopefully. When you get to the end of the phone tree, basically it used to just hang up, and now it'll just be like, for more resources, go online. It looks like she's been meeting with the interim dean of students, Deputy Provost Fabrice, and then Senate caucus that I cannot talk too much about because I do not know. Student rights happened for the past 2 weeks, I think. And yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the VP University Affairs? Councillor Wright? No? Seeing no questions, thank you very much, VP Student Life, for reading the report. We'll move onwards then to, was that a return of Councillor Wright at 2010? Thank you. 17C, report of the Vice President Internal.
Hello? Okay. So it's pretty short because I've spent most of the past 2 weeks just calling up venues and arguing. But the big thing was last night we had FACO's first ever hype night. We did because it was a 10-year anniversary, so it'd be pretty fun. And it ended up being pretty fun. We sold out a couple of days, I think, before the event itself, and then we had it to the point where people are scamming each other for tickets. So we're trying to come up with like a platform within Spin that we can avoid scammers, because it's not nice to pay like $25 for a ticket to get a piece of paper that says, "Hi, this is your Spin ticket," and that was a .doc file. So we're trying to work on that. Thanks, Maxine. She's our creative director for FACO, and she and Kyle Rubinock, who is an ex-director, put together the theme release video as well as the theme itself, which is Factendo. It's Nintendo FACO. Can we play the theme release video at speaker? Just because I want you to see the hard work that a lot of Spin committee members put into this. Yeah, just you. Can we like full? Yeah. That's a reference to last year's theme.
Frustration, look no further than this upside-down Canadian flag, where hundreds gathered to discuss separation.
We're going to make Alberta great again, and that is when we cut ourselves off from the leech that is Eastern Canada. Eastern Canada, we are going to divorce you, and for that, there's nothing you can do about it.
Like 3 more seconds.
Is that the end of your report?
No, I have like a little bit.
Okay.
Are we done? Okay.
Motion to extend for 2 minutes.
No, you still have a minute. You can keep going.
Okay, I'm just going to speak over the rest of it because like it's just some montages over there. But we have a lot of Albertan representation on Spin, and so Wexit came up as a joke theme, and so we played along with it. If any of you were looking at like the theme release items, you would have been very confused by the Wexit stuff. But that was our fake theme that we played along with for a little bit. But it's Factendo. In terms of FACO, actually, more venues are finally confirmed. We're still waiting on a couple. The big issue, of course, is just liability insurance because especially coming at the tail end of Hype, Carnival, E-Week, Science Games, and also like Frosh at the beginning, very few venues are left that actually want to work on events like this. Big surprise. So we're finding the ones that, either we haven't used or ones that are tried and tested like Cafe Campus. Yes, surprise, surprise, there will be an event at Cafe Campus. We've hired videographers. We got the same videographers as Carnival did for like a slightly lower price because, again, FACO is a smaller budget. Skunt is ongoing, and it's fun times. It should be on for the next week or so, and at the end of that, we'll have our final rosters and teams, and it'll be interesting to see how we can play that out in terms of the IRP finally being approved by every single faculty. In terms of comms, the Instagram takeovers ended up being a lot more successful than I think anyone thought they would. We have a lot of people reaching out, in fact, to the point where the comms department, shout out to Yasmin in the corner over there, can I get like a 1-minute extension? Thank you.
Councillor Freed, is there a second? Councillor Budkar, thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? A 1-minute extension is granted.
Now we now have a WooFoo form where you can, if you're on the club's portal, the same place submit an honorarium, independent contract agreement, whatever. You now have a place where you can submit a request to be on the Instagram, and then we can process that for you without you sending me an email and then me phoning out the comms department. And it's easier to have it all in one place. First year council, business as usual. They had a meeting this week. Sustainability, business as usual. Their website's almost up, should be on sustainability.smu.ca. There's a bit of an issue earlier this week with transporting stuff from their Wix site to the SMU site, but we're trying to work in a way where it just redirects to their Wix site from their SMU domain name. Alumni stuff, sorry. We're structuring MASEC to be a bit more functional. Traditionally, you have MASEC made up of student leaders on campus, and then they end up having seats or spots on different committees and lending their voices, but it's very rare that it results in anything more than just rounds of conversations. But then a few years ago, MASEC actually had subcommittees that ended up working on tiny little projects, which actually made a lot of things happen on campus. So we're bringing back the subcommittees to bring back some projects that people really enjoyed back in like 2014 and 15, and we had a bit of them in late 2017. And yeah, MASEC is always looking for more members, like always. So if you want to be on it, shoot me an email. It's a really cool committee, and you get to have meetings in a really, really beautiful building up on Peel. And I think that's the rest. Yep, that's it.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the VP internal? Councillor Dixon. Okay, departure of Councillor Dixon at 2017. Questions, VP external.
Yeah, just a question about the reselling of Hype Night tickets and others. How will that interact with the IRP and permissions given under the IRP? Like, will there be a sort of contractual agreement under the ticket, like any resale will automatically put someone in agreement with the IRP?
So how resales work currently is how they would work in an ideal world at least is because you have to pick up your bracelet with your name or with an invoice number or receipt number. You can't. If people pick up bracelets, they're on their wrists. And what happens is that if someone sells you a ticket, then you end up. We had issues like that when people came to the office with their friend's ticket, but their friend had a message saying they have sold it to them and they had invoices. The thing we would have to change in that case would be that when they come to my office to pick up a bracelet, it would be on their wrist and they can't take it home and then put it on to put it on the IRP, because as it stands, what I would assume would happen would be that if A sold the ticket to B and then B came to pick it up in my office, but B is on the IRP, we would not give it to them and would tell A of what happened. Something along those lines. I would have to see how that would fit into like the nitty-gritties of the IRP a bit more, but we would obviously try our best to keep these events as safe and secure as possible.
Thank you. Other questions on the report of the VP internal? I see no further questions, so we'll move onwards then to the report of the Vice President Finance.
Hi guys, so sorry I don't have my report written for this week. I'll work with SMU's communications department to publish it on the website tomorrow for anyone who is interested in seeing it. I'm just going to run through the basic portfolio, like both basic parts of my portfolio as I do with every report. So for the budget, beginning to slowly take shape. We're going to kind of put everything together hopefully and like run the first run and see what needs changing soon, next 2 weeks. So what we're doing is we're putting every spreadsheet together and then like running them and seeing what the total sum is and then comparing that to student fees. Bank transition, status quo. Only thing is I lied to everyone. The checks are still red. The communications department custom designed some new ones. That's very cool. 3501 Peel. Currently working on what to do with the kitchen because it's too close to the building next door to have a ventilation thing running out the side by code. So we have to make the riveting decision of, do we have an external ventilation hood through the roof, or do we have self-contained ventilation hoods? A really riveting stuff compared to FACO. I don't know why anyone would anyways, whatever. My job's fun. Investment portfolio, status quo. It's only been 2 weeks. Doesn't change too much then. Finance committee will begin reviewing it hopefully this week or next week. Sorry. Clubs again, also status quo. Just working a lot to make sure everyone's got their access. Found 2 more accounts that we can give to new clubs. So these were holding accounts that we'd had from Scotia that we'd put around $11,000 in because no clubs had claimed them. We held them for a year to see if any clubs would come forward and say that this money was theirs and that their money was missing. Nobody came forward, so after a year we put it back into the club fund, and now we're going to give those accounts to new clubs. Services, status quo. A lot of services are going for fee increases, so we're going to bring that to the finance committee. Also, what else? Yeah, fee increases, and then we're going to look again at the student life fund that was at referendum last year. Indigenous Affairs now has their credit card, so that's awesome. So they can now just spend money on the fly as they need it. So that's a great new level of flexibility that didn't exist last year. Funding, still underutilized funds. So if anyone knows anyone who wants to apply to the Green Fund, Community Engagement Fund, First Year Fund, or Mental Health Fund, let us know. And then, that's about everything. If you have any questions for me, let me know, and then there'll be a full written report on the SMU website tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the Vice President of Finance? I see no questions, and so we'll move onwards then to the report of the Vice President Student Life.
Great. So I have been meeting with a bunch of clubs about general events, troubleshooting, insurance, and contracts. I've also hosted 3 club committee meetings now, going to the student group admin meeting with a bunch of clubs or potential clubs that want to get their ideas confirmed. There are some that are very cool. I also met with MSA, who is potentially looking to become a service. In terms of the services, we're working on space allocations in the building when we move back, and we're also trying to engage McGill to see if there's any additional office spaces available outside of the UC. I also consulted with the services representative for his motion, general volunteer form things, met with MCER about their contracts, and then ISG. So we're waiting on Illegal to get back to us about signing an MOA with MOC, but I think now we've received it, so I should be able to get back to them very shortly. In terms of the mental health, meetings with the outreach committee because we have now found a new outreach coordinator, which is great. And we also met with the account manager for Keep Me Safe. I went to the hub leadership meeting as well, and I met with Representative Dixon for his feedback on the mental health policy. And also the mental health roundtable happened this past Tuesday. It was really great. Out of that, we have some action points, but basically the big one is that we're going to host Mental Health Action Week at the end of February, so keep an eye out for that. For the Eating Disorder Resources and Support Center, the Eating Disorder Awareness Week is next week, so they are hosting about 4 events, so check them out. They also have a new video out on their Facebook page, and they just opened for weekly drop-in appointments. In terms of outreach, I tabled for Know Your Rights twice. I met with Joan Butterworth from Campus Life Engagement to do facilitator training for the services. And we also reviewed activities night feedback, which was generally very positive. In terms of family care, the daycare has a new daycare director. She's the previous communications director of SSMU. Her name is Wendy Gamboa. For room bookings, I'm constantly in touch with special events and also the Dipsol. In terms of HR, we now have a new clubs and services coordinator who will be starting on Monday. So hopefully that will help and be another additional resource for clubs. And we have a new commissioner's guide. So if you have staff that have commission, or if you have commissioners as staff, please review that. And then just a couple of miscellaneous things.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the Vice President Student Life? I see no questions, and so we'll move onwards then to the report of the Vice President External Affairs.
Sorry, the report's loading. My computer has decided that it doesn't like me anymore. Okay, so I won't go through the entire report. I just do want to highlight a couple of key things. A debate that goes back probably till, like, stretches back to 2005, if not earlier, is whether to reinvest funding for universities into financial aid or into lowering tuition. I know I mentioned it during announcements. I really would like someone's guidance on this because I kind of feel like I'm just speaking at these inter-university roundtables and everyone else is like, oh, we should like definitely be doing aide financière aux étudiants work, which on some level makes sense, and it's the idea of like supporting the least off in society, but of course you're also feeding into a system which believes the students should be paying for their education and as such projecting tuition hikes going forward. Other stuff, yeah, General Assemblies are super important. They're really good deliberative bodies for people to have conversations. If those were set up in a way that seemed not collaborative, I really apologize, was not the intention. We're working on a very, very short timeline as the education students had to go on stage and would have wanted a joint strike early in the semester. But yeah, happy to take questions about that. What else? Our Turn Task Force met. So the GSVP mandates the creation of an interfaculty roundtable to talk about sexual violence support and advocacy work. So that first meeting looked super promising and more will be ongoing. What else? Oh yeah, affordable student housing plan. The notice of motion will hopefully be presented for next council. There's an Affordable Student Housing Committee meeting next week to approve it. So this is, yes, a capacity building plan for the next 5 years to see how we can work towards affordable student housing. What else? Also, yeah, big shout out to Ariana, Victoria, and Adeline. Adeline is the service admin coordinator on their work to consolidate a list of student groups doing community work. So a big problem with community engagement is there's no consolidated, like, centralized resourcing for it. So everyone's kind of working in a silo, and you sometimes get like 20 student groups asking the same community organization if they want to work with them. So these community organizations just put their emails to auto reply and say, we don't want to work with McGill. Why don't you people talk to each other? So the work of these three people to consult with clubs and see what community work is being done has been super, super helpful in setting up a more general infrastructure. And I just really wanted to thank them for that. Oh yeah, there's also an AMUSE General Assembly here. So if you do a support job on campus, you are probably with AMUSE, you're unionized. Sorry that you had to come to Ledge Council because there's an annual general meeting of AMUSE happening right now. But educate yourself on what union you're part of if you have a job on campus. Yes.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the Vice President External Affairs? Member from the gallery.
I was just wondering if the VP External knows what's going on with the SUS's Bill 21 General Assembly, because I understand that one of the science representatives here said that the General Assembly coming up on the 5th was a regular one, but I understand they posted something on Facebook saying it was the Bill 21 strike one just delayed. Do you know what's going on with that?
Vice President External Affairs? You can, if a science representative wants to take the question. Councillor Budkar?
Right, so this goes into more detail on the Facebook post. I can also send that to you, Asa, if you please. But due to the timeline that the form was submitted, and due to our constitution, we have some like room to play around in terms of when we wanted our GA. So what we could do, because there were some issues with the form, and we still wanted to hold a GA this semester, we highlighted that we were going to hold one on the 5th, if I recall correctly. And then because of that, we're kind of combining the quote unquote special General Assembly because there were some issues with the form, as well as our regular General Assembly. Yeah, if you have any more specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Other questions on the report of the Vice President, External Affairs? I see no further questions, and so with that, Councillor Marcoux.
Point of Parliament inquiry.
Yes.
I was wondering if it's possible to enter confidential period.
It is possible to enter a confidential session with a 2/3 majority, yes.
To discuss further the report of the Board of Directors.
If that's the desire of council, we can enter a confidential session for that reason. Are you making such a motion?
Yes.
So moved by Councillor Marcoux to enter a confidential session for the purpose of discussing the Board of Directors report. Is there a second? Councillor Mackey, thank you very much. I mean, I don't think it's debatable. So I need a 2/3 majority. All those in favor, please raise your placards and keep them up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 22. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. 3 opposed. Abstaining. Oh, point of parliamentary inquiry. Vice President, External Affairs. To resolve to go into a confidential session, I'm going to say is not debatable because then the subject matter of the confidential session might come up. So it's just bad practice. Yeah. Member from the gallery. There is not. No. That's the end of the agenda. Councillor Patzer. Leaving? Departure of Councillor Patzer at 20:30. And so with 22-3, we have a clear 2/3 majority. We'll resolve to go into confidential session after a 5-minute recess. So we'll resolve to go into confidential session at 20:35. And we'll take a 5-minute recess now.